Welcome to Module 6, where we're going to discuss the microorganisms in the soil. This first section of 3 is going to be concentrated basically on vocabulary terms. So, one of the tools for looking at microorganisms in the soil is the microscope. We hopefully will have a microscope lab in this class, and you will definitely have microscope labs in your final semester here next year. One of the important things to remember about, went back the wrong way, is soil is three-dimensional. So we've got roots, we've got hyphae, we've got macroorganisms in there, a tick, also this macroorganism, a nematode, and nematodes are going to be something we're going to be able to look at. But we're taking a three-dimensional space in the soil where this root is round and things are going out in all directions. And to look at it in a microscope, we need to make that flat. So we put a cover slip on it, and you can see some stuff is focused, some stuff is out of focus. Lots of nematodes in there, plant parts. So learning to discriminate between the different organisms or different plant parts, or soil for that matter. Sand grains are very interesting, and you should spend some time looking at soil when we get into a microscope lab. It will help you understand this three-dimensional space that you're going to manage to be a successful turf manager. So, a little knowledge. A quarter tablespoon of fertile soil, sandy loam, perhaps from Michigan, is going to have in it 50 macroorganisms, nematodes, 62,000 algae, 72,000 amoeba. See lots of amoeba when we look under the microscope. 111,000 different fungi, 2 million, almost 3 million actinomycetes, and 25 million bacteria. So we're going to talk about all of these in section 2 of life in the soil. And when we look at that under the microscope, this is at a low power, and one of the big mistakes people make when looking at the microscope is they generally try to look at too high a power. You want to start low and work up to high. But most of the things we need to see as turfgrass managers, we can see at 20x. 10x is a good. This is a 10x picture. You can see there's nematodes in here. This is actually from a local golf course green. So nematodes can get to be a big problem. You can see there's some plant roots, there's some trichomes, there's some hyphae. So lots of stuff that we'll learn to identify when we get to the microscope lab portion of this course. So, onto our vocabulary terms. One of the major vocabulary terms highlighted in red here is rhizosphere. So the question is, where are the microorganisms and why? And it turns out they're in the rhizosphere, and that's the first ½ inch from plant roots. So the microorganisms go where the plants are. And why is that? Because that's where the things the microorganisms need are. They need air, which is in there, but air is probably not as much by the roots, but air is all over. They need water, which is in that top layer. Air's in the top layer. They need food, which is the plant roots generally, or the dead, dying, sloughing plant roots. And they need root exudate from the root tip. The root exudate is all the stuff coming off the root, and that's one of the areas where there's the most food for bacteria and fungi and other microorganisms, because the plant's building a lot of cells and respiring a lot there and pushing off those dead cells. So if you recall your plant anatomy, that root exudate is something that the plants and microorganisms and everybody is fighting over. So the carbon cycle is very important, and microorganisms are a very important component of the carbon cycle. Photosynthesis makes 150 billion tons of carbohydrates. That CHO is my shorthand for carbohydrates. So plants are the primary producers in the system. They're taking CO2 from the air, making sugar. Lots and lots of it. And they're the only organism, well, that they're one of the few organisms that can do this. Plants do it the most, but there are some bacteria that can also do it. But primarily plants are making energy, and it's an expensive process, but they get sugar from doing this. The sugar is the storage mechanism for that energy. They use the sun to make an energy form that they can store and that we can use and that we eat. So without this primary producers, there would be nothing on Earth. Primary consumers would be cows. Cows eat plants. So anything that eats the plants, all the insects that eat the plants, all the fungi that eat the plants, those are the primary consumers, and they get their sugar from plants. Secondary consumers would be us. When we go to McDonald's and eat a hamburger, we're eating the cow that ate the grass that photosynthesized the sugar that used the energy from the sun. So why is not all of the sugar in the organisms that eventually eat it? How does it get back into the air? Well, the thing that gets it back into the air are these decomposers, and most all of the decomposers are microorganisms. Vultures might be a decomposer too, but when the vulture dies, the thing that decomposes that is bacteria. So they take the carbohydrates, they respire them, and move them back to CO2. They break down the organic matter, so they crawl into the dead stuff. They break down the leaf matter, break down dead animals, or crop residue. So Jimmy Hoffa's festering flesh is going to be turned back into useful stuff by microorganisms, and that's part of the reason they're so important in understanding soil and the world. So some of our vocabulary terms: the decomposers do mineralization. So when they mineralize, when they crawl into Jimmy Hoffa and they take the sugar, they leave behind nutrients, or particularly nitrogen, phosphorus, and this remineralized nutrients are very important in a very important process done by microorganisms. They leave humus, so the material that's harder to decompose, longer chains, they can't chew on them, is humic material, and we're going to talk about humic material a little bit in some of the next slides. It resists decay. It's a complex organic compound, and it's what humic acid or humus is what gives the soil its dark color. So humus consists of proteins, lignins, and more of the complex sugars. It's still decomposing, but it decomposes much more slowly. It adds a lot of cation exchange capacity, nutrient holding sites to the soil, so that's why it helps. It has some rooting hormone in it, so when we put humus on soils with no humus, the grass does a lot better. Sometimes somebody will, in the future, will try to sell you some humic acid. Is it already there? If you have a big thatch layer, it's probably already there. If not, if it's a new putting green, maybe it makes some sense, but you need to do that for yourself. You can't have a salesman tell you what you need, and you need to understand. So this is one of the snake oils out there, but it's definitely useful, and it's definitely in a lot of soils already. Some more keywords. Autotrophic means makes its own food. Heterotropic means gets food from others. So plants would be autotrophs. Some fungi would be heterotrophs. Some bacteria could be autotrophs. Some bacteria are heterotrophs. A parasite feeds on plants or animals or in a detrimental way. Predators feed on soil life. So there are some stinging wasps and other things like that that feed on soil life. I guess we could be considered predators. Sometimes we'll feed on some life in the soil. If you were to eat a rabbit, that would be eating life in the soil if it got it out of its burrow. And then saprophytes feed on dead, dying organic material. So these are the most important mineralizers we're going to talk about, and very important to the soil system. When we talk about oxygen, we have aerobic, or bacteria that use oxygen as the terminal electron acceptor, and anaerobic. exist in low oxygen sites. They can be facultative or obligative. Facultative can go either way. Obligative must be anaerobic. They're plentiful in poorly drained sites, and that's these bacteria, the bacteria that give you the smell of pig mud in wet areas. Another place microorganisms are important, as you recall, are the symbiotic relationship of rhizobia in the legumes, also converting ammonia to nitrate and nitrite is a bacterial process. So bacteria are very important in the soil system, probably even more so than we already know. In our next slide, our next section, section 2, we are going to get a little closer and look at the specific microorganisms we talked about in the tablespoon slide. So let's see you in section 2.